So, without further ado, I will hand it over to our first presenter, Mr. Dean Brooks. Please welcome him.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see all of you. I just don't want you to get dizzy. This kind of spins around, so I'll try to go through it a little slowly. But as mentioned, I work with the Interagency Network for Education Emergencies, INEE, and I'm just curious before we start, how many members of INEE are here? I know 2 in the front. Nyoko, who used to work with us actually, is now with JICA. Anybody else in the back? Okay, so after this, I hope all of you join. So I'll tell you how. Okay. So today we're going to talk about education emergencies and what is that, and what we believe is it is education that protects, fosters learning, and nurtures development in crisis situations. The video is missing, so we won't be showing that. But it is a video, and I can show you where we have a number of videos like what we saw from UNHCR. We have a whole media page, so I'll tell you where we can find that on the INE website. So the first part I want to talk about is why education in emergencies. And I just want to actually, before I start that, one thing we were talking about earlier is in education emergencies, we actually look at the whole range of education response. So when we're talking about this, we're looking at protracted crisis, we're looking at acute crisis, and we're hoping to build better, so we're also looking at when we recover from crisis. So that's what we're looking at, the whole range when we're talking about that today. But why? Because it is a right, first and foremost. One thing we find in any emergency is actually communities, families, children, parents, teachers, they demand education. And actually in my own work over the years, any crisis that I was responding to, I used to work on emergency response. When I arrived, I'd actually find schools were already set up or communities that are actually organized, and then the NGOs came in. And so this is also why education in emergencies. As mentioned earlier about displacement, the average length of a conflict in the lowest income countries is 12 years. So if we wait to provide education, what happens? When we talk about displacement, on average it's 17, but it's going up to 20 in some cases. And then, when we've been talking about over the last 2 days, out-of-school children, when we talk about that, over half of out-of-school children actually live in conflict. This is a figure from Education for All Global Monitoring Report. It just shows you how 28.5 million are living in conflict. I'll just slow down because I don't want you to get dizzy. So we talked about why. I'd like to talk now a bit about the benefits. One of the things we often say about education emergencies is that it's life-saving. And this is an argument we've had for years, especially in humanitarian circles. But I can attest to this from my own experience, and I'll just give you a quick example. How is it life-saving? So I used to work in northern Uganda, and we had a cholera outbreak. And all the education actors said, oh, okay, well, that's for the health people to deal with. But I was like, no, education is life-saving. We have a responsibility here. So what we did is we organized, we went and talked to the health people, we talked to the WASH people, and we ended up doing a drama campaign across the region on how children could protect themselves from cholera. So I think that's a very simple example of one of the things that happens in education emergencies response is making sure that we give life-saving information. And I think we have a lot of work to do in this, and we can learn from our colleagues, especially from the water sanitation colleagues and the health colleagues. So actually INEE is discussing some of that now with those different sectors. One of the most important reasons and the benefit of education emergencies is its protective factor, and that's why schools should be safe. They're not always safe, but they should be safe. This is one that I think a lot of people don't reflect on so much, but actually this morning I was thinking about it again when we were hearing those discussions in the morning, especially the points that were made by, I think she was from Harvard, and she was talking about the trauma. And one of the things that we find is that when kids can get back control of their lives, school is one way for them to get their control back. And so it has this normalizing effect. And actually, Caroline and I were talking about this earlier as well. For example, Caroline has a program in Gaza, and what they were doing there was trying to bring the kids back to school, welcoming them back to school. So the first day of school is not taking a test. It's actually this kind of short period of time where we're just getting back into the routine of school, and it has this normalizing effect. And then another window of opportunity in emergencies is the opportunity to rebuild, and what we often say is to build back better and build upon existing things that were maybe there before the crisis. I used to work in Aceh, for example, after the tsunami, and what we did there was we did teacher training, but we didn't just set up teacher training. We went to the ministry, we talked to them, and we found that we should actually build on a program that existed before the tsunami. And of course, peace building. It's a chance to provide that. And it contributes to the lasting development of individuals and societies. This is a really nice graphic that actually comes from UNESCO, but it gives you really, we won't go into it all now, but and you can have a copy of this presentation. I think these are provided. But I actually really like it because when you're actually trying to explain why education, it talks about all the benefits of education. And if you can see it there, it's everything from mothers' lives, employment, empowering women, tolerance, economic growth, all the transformative factors related to education. I'll just talk about this briefly, but we'd say education in emergencies. We now are having much more attention to education emergencies, but the fact remains that it is the lowest sector that receives humanitarian aid. And actually, this graphic is actually showing us that in 2013, I think it was, education received only 1.4% of all funding, and only 1/4 of the funding needs were met. And just recently, I think it was last year, that number actually went below 1%. So we do see more and more, it was below, yeah. We see more and more interest, we see more and more people talking about education emergencies, but we don't see the funding coming in, actually. And I guess this would be a good point to just time to mention. Those of you who've been following the INEE's work, we just finished a consultation on a global discussion taking place now around a platform and a fund for education in emergencies, which should be, the plan is to actually launch that at the World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul in May. But a lot of people are working and discussing, and many meetings are going on. INEE is doing all it can to get that information out to people. But there is a real momentum at the moment with a number of champions, including Gordon Brown, Julia Gilliard, Tony Lake from UNICEF, really trying to push and build that momentum so that we could address this huge gap when it comes to education emergencies. So now, let me tell you about INEE. First of all, our logo, we need to fix it, but that takes money and time. But it says an international network, but as we said earlier, it stands for interagency, but we are an international network. So that's something we want to fix, but just in case anybody ever asks you, you can say, no, it's interagency. So INEE was actually founded in 2000. Well, the idea of it was even before that. But at the in Dakar at the World Education Forum. INEE was actually conceived. A few months later, there was a meeting held at UNHCR Geneva. And actually this year we held our 15th birthday party at UNHCR Geneva. And we were actually founded by UNICEF, UNESCO, UNHCR, CARE International, and the Norwegian Refugee Council. Since then, a number of agencies, like you said earlier, I sit at the International Rescue Committee. And those agencies came together and said we needed to create a network for education emergencies. So it was a very small group of people at the beginning with one coordinator, and then it grew. So today, we're 15 years old, and when I checked the statistics right before getting on the plane, we were 11,998 members. So if somebody here joins, you might be number 12,000. So. But we are a free, open, global network. And why I say join is because actually it's very simple. You go to the website and you click join, and you fill out a form. And you tell us what you're interested in, and we look at it to make sure you're a real person, and then we accept you. So that's about all it takes. And we have a number of ways to get engaged and work with it. And what I always say is the network is strong because of its members. It's incredible what the members do for the network. So 11,998. 170 countries, and we represent 130 organizations. That's just some of the logos. And as I said, we are all around the world. One thing we try to do twice a year at least, if not more, is we do an activity called meetups, and so our members actually meet up in countries around the world, and we provide questions, and it's a chance for our members actually to connect and engage and actually feedback. So we just did a meetup, global meetups, to get feedback on this discussion around a global platform. And that feedback is actually quite important into the design of what this platform will actually be. So I'm actually sitting on those there's a lot of bureaucracy to it, but anyway, there's a number of committees working on the design of this platform. And so my job is actually to represent the members. So actually when the members fed that information back, I have to really study that because I actually can't say what I think. I have to say what the members think. I put this here because I think it's actually quite important for people to understand. And the best way, for example, my mom, when I took this job, said, well, what is it you do? And she's like, you don't build schools? And I was like, well, actually, no, INEE doesn't do that. We support members who do that. And she was like, but then you sit at IRC? And I was like, well, yeah, because we're actually kind of like that cloud thing that you hear about. So actually, INEE has a secretariat, and we're only 6 people. So 6 people around the world. We have somebody sitting in Norway, somebody sitting in Geneva, somebody sitting in San Francisco, and 3 of us are in New York. And basically, that's like a cloud, and so much of our work is virtual, supporting our members. And it's actually, for me, it's actually quite amazing to think that INEE can have such a reach and only have 6 staff. So we do need more, but that's another point. But the reason I put this here is when I took this job, I've been in this job for about 1.5 years now, it was also important for me to actually understand what is it we do. And we actually use these functions we talk about. This is what INEE does. So anytime somebody comes to us, we always have to reflect as a secretariat. Does this fit our functions? Is this a community building request? Is this convening diverse stakeholders? Does this involve knowledge management? So if you go to our website, you'll find many resources there. Or is this an amplifying and advocating activity that we're looking at? Or is it about facilitating and learning? So for example, next week in Washington, we're actually going to be doing a TOT on the minimum standards, which I'll show you in a sec. And then lastly, our functions are around providing to our members so they can do better work. I just want to bring your attention, when you go to our website, the toolkit is actually where you will find vetted resources. So INEE has 3 working groups, one on advocacy, one on policy, one on standards and practice. Those groups feed into our toolkit. So you'll see that on the website. And there you will find good practice guides, guidance, all types of resources to help you in your work. All of them are free. And we work in 5 languages: Arabic, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. So most of them, if not all of them, are translated. We do have some resources translated into Thai, but it really depends on our members taking that work forward. I only have a few minutes, but I just want to bring your attention to the minimum standards for education and emergencies. And you notice the terms there: preparedness, response, recovery. These actually apply across. These were actually developed, if you've ever heard of the SPHERE standards, we followed that same process, and we actually are a companion to the SPHERE standards. So we meet with them regularly, and we have an agreement with them. And these were actually developed by over 5,000 people over the last few years through consultative events and agreement across the world. And this is the 2nd edition, the 2010. As you'll see, we have it translated into many languages. Again, we have our 5 working languages. The other languages that you see were actually members translating those. And they actually have to go through a process to have it approved with the logo. One of our more recent resources that we've developed. Again, everything we do is consultative, interagency. The conflict-sensitive education, I like to think of it as the kind of do-no-harm approach to education emergencies. Here you'll find guidance notes. If you look on the toolkit, you will find videos. You will find all types of resources to look at conflict-sensitive education. There's a whole pack, as you'll see here. This is why we do it. We talked about this earlier, but this is really our vision. It's about quality education, the right to education, even in emergencies. One thing we really see happening across the globe is more and more countries taking on the minimum standards, contextualizing the minimum standards, especially in the Middle East. Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq. Turkey is now talking about doing the same. Inside Syria, they're looking at this. But the minimum standards and making those a part of a country's policy, we're seeing more and more. At the moment, we have 10 countries that have done that. We have about 7 countries across the world right now in that process at this very moment. So there's the website. And all you have to do, it's actually very simple, is you just go to ineesite.org. You will see the join or login button in the right-hand corner. And again, it's all free. I do hope you will consider joining if you believe in education emergencies. You know, you do need to support this idea. And again, everything is there for you. So happy to discuss this after the talk. Thank you.